My name is Katerina, and this is the story of how my boyfriend tried to use my dying mother to teach me a lesson, and how I taught him one he'll never forget. When my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer, my boyfriend refused to pick up her pain medication from the pharmacy next to his gym, claiming it wasn't his responsibility. I'd been with Javier for 3 years, living together in our San Eladio apartment for one, when my mother's cancer returned, aggressive and untreatable. The doctors gave her 4 months, but she barely lasted 3. During those months, I became a shadow of myself, balancing my job at a marketing firm with daily 40-minute drives each way to San Eladio General Hospital. I was drowning in medical paperwork, insurance disputes, and the desperate need to ease her pain while watching her slip away. I never asked Javier for help until the day my car broke down, and I needed him to pick up her prescription on his way home from work. The pharmacy was right next to his gym in downtown San Eladio, where he went religiously every day. He looked up from his video game and said 4 words that shattered my view of him, our relationship, and my future. Not my responsibility. You need to learn to be more independent. My mother died 2 weeks later, and he had the gall to stand at her funeral in Oceanside, playing the supportive boyfriend, accepting condolences from my family who had no idea he'd never once visited her or lifted a finger to help. That night, sitting in our apartment while he laughed with his online gaming buddies, oblivious to my grief, I made my decision. If my problems weren't his responsibility, then his would no longer be mine. I started small the next morning by not setting his alarm, something I'd done daily since we moved in together. Getting to work on time wasn't my responsibility. He woke up 2 hours late, scrambling and yelling, asking why I didn't wake him. I shrugged, sipped my coffee, and said nothing. Next, I stopped making his breakfast and packing his lunch, which I'd done every day because feeding him wasn't my responsibility. He resorted to fast food for a week, then complained about gaining weight and feeling sick from the grease. When he whined about his stomach, I said, "Your health isn't my responsibility." Laundry followed. Washing his clothes wasn't my responsibility either. He ran out of clean work shirts and wore the same one 3 days straight until his coworkers at his tech startup commented on the smell. Then I stopped managing his calendar and appointments. He missed his dentist appointment, racking up a no-show fee, and forgot to renew his car registration, getting pulled over for expired tags in San Eladio's gas lamp district. Furious about the ticket, he yelled, but I calmly reminded him that keeping track of his life wasn't my responsibility. I stopped buying his favorite groceries, only shopping for myself. He'd stand in front of our empty fridge, baffled about where his protein shakes and meal prep containers went. I stopped cleaning his gaming corner, which turned into a revolting pile of empty energy drink cans and chip bags, attracting ants. I stopped reminding him about his mother's birthday, his sister's art gallery opening, and the big pitch he'd been preparing for weeks at work. Each time he raged about how I knew these things mattered, I'd calmly say his family and job weren't my responsibility. His friends noticed the shift because I stopped organizing our social life. No more dinner parties I planned and cooked while he took credit. No more remembering his friends' birthdays or booking those coveted tea times at Torrey Pines he loved to boast about. His social circle collapsed within a month, and his best friend Miguel pulled me aside at a bar in La Jolla, saying, "You're being really cold to him lately." I replied, "His feelings aren't my responsibility." His work started slipping because I stopped proofreading his reports and presentations, something I'd always done. His boss, Elena Torres, called him out on the drop in quality. He came home stressed, confused about why everything was falling apart, and tried to talk about being a team. I reminded him that when I needed support during the hardest time of my life, he said it wasn't his responsibility, so I was just following his example. Things hit a breaking point when he forgot his huge quarterly review presentation because I stopped updating our shared calendar. He called me 15 times during my workday, panicking because he couldn't find his notes and didn't know the meeting time. I didn't answer. His job wasn't my responsibility. He barely got through the presentation, but Elena was unimpressed and hinted at reconsidering his promotion. He broke down when he realized he'd forgotten to pay rent, something I always handled, and his credit cards were maxed because I stopped tracking his spending. He cried, asking how I could let things get so bad. I said, "Your finances were never my responsibility. You just assumed they were." One morning, I woke up early and packed everything I owned while he slept off 6 beers from gaming until 3 a.m. I glanced at the calendar and saw he'd invited his boss and her husband over for dinner that night. He'd prepared nothing. I loaded my car with boxes and stood in our bedroom doorway, watching him sleep in his filthy sheets, surrounded by the chaos of his unmanaged life. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Elena and her husband, Ricardo, dressed for dinner, waiting for Javier, who was still passed out in his boxers. This was the moment of choice: cover for him or let his life implode. The doorbell rang again, then a third time, more insistent. I pictured Elena and Ricardo standing on our doorstep in their nice clothes, probably checking their phones to confirm the date. The dinner Javier had promised, the dinner he'd completely forgotten. The knocking grew louder. "Javier? Hello? It's Elena!" Her voice called through the door. Elena Torres, the woman who held Javier's career in her hands, stood outside our grimy apartment while he slept off his hangover. I grabbed my keys, took one last look at the disaster that used to be our home, and slipped out the back door to the parking garage. As I descended the concrete stairs, the knocking echoed above. They weren't giving up. Elena was not someone who tolerated being stood up. In the garage, my footsteps reverberated off the walls, and then shouting erupted from our apartment window 3 floors up. "What the hell is this?" Elena's voice boomed. "Javier, wake up!" I heard a woman's voice too. Ricardo's wife, Sophia, whom I'd met at last year's company holiday party. She'd admired my earrings and asked where I got them. Now she was saying, "Elena, we should go." This place, oh my God, the smell. I unlocked my car, tossed my purse onto the passenger seat, and through the garage opening, I heard Javier's slurred, confused voice. "What? What's happening? Why are you here?" "We're here for dinner." Elena's voice cracked with fury. "The dinner you scheduled. The dinner you confirmed yesterday. Instead, I find you passed out drunk at 7 p.m. My Honda's engine purred as I backed out. Elena's voice carried one last time. "This is what you call sick? You said you were too sick to work today. You're done, Javier. Done." Sophia was muttering about ants, moldy dishes, and how no one could live like this. I pictured her in her elegant dress, hand over her nose, staring at the wreckage of what happened when I stopped being Javier's unpaid life manager. I drove out of the garage into the San Eladio sunset. In my rearview mirror, I saw Elena and Ricardo emerge from our building's entrance. Ricardo shook his head while Elena gestured angrily, phone to her ear, likely calling HR to start Javier's termination. My phone buzzed in my purse, but I ignored it. The timing felt almost too perfect, his boss arriving just as I left with my car packed. The universe delivering karma with surgical precision. I knew it was Javier without checking. He'd be awake now, the reality of his failure sinking through his hangover. His boss had seen him passed out after lying about being sick, seen the squalor he lived in, and told him he was finished. I drove through San Eladio as the sky darkened, my phone buzzing relentlessly. 20 minutes out, it started ringing nonstop. I pulled into a gas station to fill up something I'd always done for both our cars and checked my phone. 15 missed calls from Javier, 3 from his mom Carmen, and a flood of texts. "Where are you? What did you do? My boss was here. Please answer. This is your fault. You knew about the dinner." I deleted them all without reading further and silenced my phone. 40 minutes later, I checked into a roadside motel near Encinitas. Nothing fancy, just clean, quiet, and mine. The clerk, a bored teenager, barely looked up as I paid in cash and signed the register with just my name, Katerina, no one else's. For the first time in 3 years, I was just me. The room was small but tidy, with a bed, a TV, and a desk by the window. I sat on the bed and breathed deeply, a breath I hadn't taken since my mom got sick, since I started carrying responsibilities that were mine, his, and everyone's but never shared. By midnight, my phone showed 47 missed calls from Javier, 20 voicemails I knew would range from confusion to rage to desperation. I deleted them all in one go. Delete all. Confirm. Gone. Then Carmen called. Javier's mother, always polite but distant, never quite approving of me but never saying why. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Honey, I'm sorry to call so late," she said, her voice cautious but worried. "Javier's here, and he's very upset. He says you left? That you're gone? He's not making sense. Do you know why he's so upset? He mentioned something about his boss?" I sat on the motel bed, staring at my reflection in the dark TV screen. "You should ask him, Carmen. His life isn't my responsibility anymore." "What do you mean?" she asked. "You're his girlfriend. You live together. Of course you're responsible for each other." "Am I?" I said. "Was he responsible for me when my mother was dying?" Silence. "Javier said you've been cold since your mother died, that you've been distant and cruel." I laughed not bitterly, but genuinely amused at his spin. "Did he tell you about the prescription?" "What prescription?" she asked. "When my mom was dying, my car broke down. I needed him to pick up her pain medication. The pharmacy was right next to his gym in downtown San Eladio. He went there every day, Carmen, every single day. He drove past that pharmacy for 3 months while I drove 40 minutes each way to watch my mother die." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "I asked him once," I continued. "One time in 3 months, I asked him to pick up her prescription on his way home. Do you know what he said?" "What did he say?" Her voice was barely audible. "He said it wasn't his responsibility, that I needed to learn to be more independent. My mother was dying. I hadn't slept in weeks. I was drowning in medical bills and insurance forms, and he couldn't drive 30 seconds out of his way because it wasn't his responsibility." "That doesn't sound like him," Carmen said, but her tone wavered, like she was rethinking things. "Your son isn't my responsibility," I told her. "Not anymore. He made that clear when my responsibilities didn't matter to him. Goodbye, Carmen." I hung up and blocked Javier's number on everything: phone, email, social media, apps, all of it. Then I changed the passwords for Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, HBO Max, all in my name, paid with my card. He'd have to figure out his own entertainment. The next morning, I woke up refreshed for the first time in months. No alarm to set for him, no breakfast to make, no lunch to pack, no schedule to manage. Just me, getting ready for my own day at my own pace. I called our landlord from the motel parking lot. Patricia had always been reasonable, and she listened as I explained the situation. I need to remove myself from the lease, I told her. I've already paid this month's rent. But going forward, it's just going to be Javier. I'll need both of you to sign the modification, Patricia said. He'll sign it, I said. He doesn't have a choice. I'm not living there anymore, and I won't be paying anymore. If he doesn't sign it, you're still legally responsible, she warned. I understand. But Patricia, between you and me, you might want to do an inspection soon and maybe ask him about his employment status. She was quiet for a moment. That bad? Let's just say his boss made an unexpected visit last night and didn't like what she found. I'll stop by tomorrow, she said. And honey, I'm sorry about your mother. I remember when you moved in. You mentioned she was sick. Thank you, I said, and meant it. The landlord had shown more concern than my boyfriend of 3 years. I drove to work and parked in my usual spot at the marketing firm in downtown San Eladio. Walking into the building felt different, lighter. My coworker Sophia looked up from her desk as I passed. Hey, you okay? She asked. You look different. Good different, I said. I'm great. And I realized I meant it. Around lunch, Carmen called again. I almost didn't answer, but decided to hear her out one last time. I spoke to Javier about the dinner party, she said without preamble. He forgot he'd invited his boss over. He forgot because you usually put everything in the calendar. Is that true? Yes, I said. And you stopped doing that? I stopped doing a lot of things after he told me my dying mother wasn't my responsibility. He's saying you sabotaged him, that you deliberately let him fail. I didn't let him do anything, I said. I just stopped preventing his failures. There's a difference. What else did you stop doing? She asked. And there was something different in her voice now, not accusation, but curiosity. Everything. His laundry, his meals, his appointments, his bills, his shopping, his social calendar, his work reminders, his family obligations. Everything he decided wasn't his responsibility when I needed him. His boss fired him, she said quietly. Called him this morning and told him not to bother coming back. 20 minutes ago, he got an email that his security badge has been deactivated. That's not my responsibility, I said. No, she agreed. It's not. I'm starting to understand that. He's been calling you all morning from my phone since you blocked him. He wants to know why you did this to him. I didn't do anything to him. I just stopped doing everything for him. If his life falls apart without me managing it, what does that say about him? It says I failed as a mother, she said quietly. I should have taught him to take care of himself instead of expecting women to do it for him. I didn't disagree, so I stayed silent. The prescription, she said suddenly. The one from the pharmacy. Did you ever get it? I took 3 buses, I told her. It took me 2 hours each way. My mom was in agony the entire time. She cried from the pain while I sat on those buses. And when I finally got home with her medication, Javier was at the gym, posting a selfie about grinding and no excuses, while I was on public transportation trying to get pain relief for my dying mother. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice cracking. I'm so sorry. Your son isn't my responsibility, I said again, gentler this time. Maybe now he'll learn to be responsible for himself. I hung up and went back to work. My desk felt different without my phone buzzing constantly with reminders about Javier's life. No texts about what was for dinner, no calls about where his things were, no messages about appointments I needed to schedule for him. Just quiet, peace, space to think about my own life for once. 3 weeks passed in that peaceful quiet before Diego called me on a random Tuesday afternoon. We'd been texting since a party where we met, just casual chats about books, restaurants, and work. But this call was different. Hey, I know this is last minute, he said, but I just got out of a meeting that ran way over and I'm exhausted. We still on for dinner tonight? Yeah, of course, I said, already mentally shifting from the upscale restaurant we'd planned to something more casual. Would you hate me if I suggested something different? I'm dead on my feet, but I really want to see you. What if I cook for us instead? My place is closer to your office anyway. I sat there, stunned for a second. A man who was tired from work wasn't canceling our plans or expecting me to handle takeout. He was offering to cook. That sounds perfect, I managed. Diego's apartment was nothing fancy, but it was clean and organized, not obsessively neat, just normal adult clean. He had actual food in his refrigerator, not just beer and condiments. While he cooked chicken and vegetables, he poured me a glass of wine, and we talked about our days. You mentioned your mom passed recently, he said, while stirring something that smelled incredible. When's her birthday? I'd like to remember it if that's okay. I told him the date, October 15th, and watched him pull out his phone right then and add it to his calendar, not asking me to remind him later, not making it my job to ensure he remembered, just taking responsibility for information that mattered to someone he was getting to know. My dad died 5 years ago, he said, handing me a plate that looked restaurant quality. Cancer too. Javier needed 47 calls to figure out what one prescription pickup could have taught him. Sometimes the person doing everything stops, and suddenly you realize you can't do anything. The anniversaries are hard. We talked about grief over dinner, real conversation about real things. He did the dishes afterward without making a big deal about it, just started cleaning while we kept talking. When I offered to help, he handed me a dish towel, and we worked side by side like it was the most natural thing in the world. October 15th came 2 months later. We'd been officially dating for 6 weeks, taking things slow and steady. That morning, Diego texted me. Thinking of you today? Want company at the cemetery, or would you rather go alone? I stared at my phone in the San Eladio Memorial Park parking lot. I'd driven there alone, planning to visit Mom's grave on my lunch break, as I always did. But Diego was offering something Javier never had the choice of support, without the burden of asking for it. Company would be nice, I texted back. 20 minutes later, his car pulled up beside mine. He carried a small bouquet of yellow roses, my mom's favorite flowers. I'd mentioned it once, maybe twice in passing. How did you remember? I asked as we walked toward her grave. I put it in my phone when you told me, he said simply. Important things about important people. That's what calendars are for. We stood at her grave, and he didn't try to fill the silence with empty platitudes. He just stood there, his hand warm in mine, while I told my mom about my promotion, my new apartment, and this man who remembered things without being asked. She would have liked you, I said as we walked back to our cars. I would have liked to meet her, he said. The woman who raised someone as strong as you must have been incredible. That night, he cooked dinner again. We were falling into a pattern where we alternated cooking, though we hadn't explicitly discussed it. It just happened naturally, like real partners figure things out. 6 months after leaving Javier, I ran into him at a gas station near my old neighborhood in San Eladio. I was inside paying when I saw him through the window, standing at pump 3 in a wrinkled fast food uniform. The car he drove looked like it belonged in a junkyard, rust eating through the wheel wells, duct tape holding the bumper together. He was counting crumpled bills, smoothing them out one by one before feeding them into the machine $5. Exactly. I watched him watch the numbers tick up. His shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen. This was Javier without someone managing his life. I stayed inside the store, pretending to browse magazines until he finished pumping. But instead of leaving, he started walking toward the store, toward me. Our eyes met through the glass door, and his face went white, then red, then white again. I turned back to the counter and asked the clerk about their car wash prices, keeping my back to the door as Javier entered. "Can I help you?" the clerk asked someone behind me. "Pack of Marlboros," Javier said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "The red ones." He didn't smoke when we were together, called it a weak person's crutch. But there he was, buying cigarettes with what looked like his last $10 while I stood 3 feet away, pretending he didn't exist. I walked past him toward the door, keys in hand, eyes forward. He said my name, quiet and desperate, but I kept walking. In the parking lot, I heard footsteps behind me and walked faster, hitting the lock button on my key fob when I was still 10 feet from my car. "Please," he called out, "just let me say something." I got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. In my rearview mirror, I watched him stand there in that ugly uniform, holding his cigarettes, looking like a man who'd thrown away everything good because he couldn't care about anyone but himself. 2 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived at my new apartment. The return address was Javier's parents' house in Oceanside, but the handwriting was his. I recognized it from the notes I used to leave him, the shopping lists, the calendar reminders on our fridge. I held the envelope, feeling its weight. An apology? An explanation? A desperate rewrite of history? I walked to the kitchen trash can and dropped it in unopened. His words, his feelings, his need to be heard, none of that was my responsibility anymore. That weekend, Carmen sent me a Facebook message. I'd unfriended her months ago, but she could still message me. "Javier's in therapy now," she wrote. "The therapist is helping him understand how much you did. He made a list of everything you handled, and it was 3 pages long. He can't believe one person managed all that." I didn't respond. What was there to say? That I couldn't believe it either looking back? That I'd been drowning for 3 years and he never threw me a life preserver? That it took losing everything for him to see what he'd had? My therapist, Dr. Rivera, and I talked about it in our next session. She'd been helping me process not just my mom's death, but the secondary trauma of going through it alone. "Do you feel guilty?" she asked, a question she'd posed for months. "No," I said, and for the first time, I meant it. I feel nothing but relief. His life is finally as hard as mine was. No, actually, it's different. I was managing 2 lives while grieving my mother. He's just managing one, and he can't even do that. "That's not vindictive," Dr. Rivera said when I worried I sounded cruel. "That's observational. You're seeing the natural consequences of his choices." Antoine, Javier's friend, messaged me a month later about something unexpected. "Hey, I know things are weird with you and Javier, but thought you should know. He missed his sister's art gallery opening. Again. Sophia's show was a big deal, and he forgot, even though he's living at home with their parents. Carmen is beside herself. I remembered Sophia's college art show 3 years ago. I'd put it in our calendar, bought a card, reminded Javier daily for a week. We'd made it on time, and he took credit for remembering while his family praised his thoughtfulness. "That's sad," I replied to Antoine, because it was. Sophia was a sweet person who'd always been kind to me, but her brother's failure to remember important dates wasn't my problem anymore. Diego and I had been together 8 months when we decided to move in together. The conversation happened naturally over breakfast one Sunday, both of us reading the paper at his kitchen table in his Hillcrest apartment. "My lease is up in 2 months, he said, looking up from the real estate section. "Mine's month to month," I said. "Want to look for a place together?" he asked. "Something that's ours." Not yours or mine, but ours. Yes, I said, and it was that simple. No manipulation, no assumptions, no one person making all the decisions while the other coasted. We spent 3 weekends looking at apartments, and Diego made spreadsheets comparing prices, locations, and amenities. He scheduled half the viewings. I scheduled the other half. When we found the perfect place, a 2-bedroom with great light and a kitchen big enough for 2 to cook together, we both filled out the application. Both names on the lease, both credit checks, both responsible. The day we moved in, Diego brought a dry erase board for the kitchen. I thought we could make a chore chart, he said, almost shyly. Not because I think you won't do your share, just so we both know what needs doing, and neither of us ends up doing everything. I kissed him right there in our new kitchen, surrounded by boxes, because he understood something Javier never had. Partnership meant sharing the load, not dumping it on one person. We divided everything evenly, not just chores, but emotional labor. He called his family, I called mine. He remembered his friends' birthdays, I remembered mine. When his mother got sick that winter, he took time off to help her, and I supported him without taking over. When my car needed repairs, he drove me to work, but I handled the mechanic and insurance. A year after leaving Javier, almost to the day, Carmen sent another message, different from her usual updates about his struggles. He's dating someone new, she wrote. A girl from his therapy group. She's 22 and talks about how much she loves taking care of him. I want to warn her, but I know she won't listen. I didn't listen when Elena's mother tried to warn me 30 years ago. I looked at the girl's Facebook profile because I'm human and curious. She looked young, eager, and already exhausted, posting photos of elaborate meals she'd cooked for him with captions about taking care of my man, and love is putting someone else first. I felt bad for her. This girl about to lose years managing someone else's life. But Carmen was right, she wouldn't listen to warnings. I wouldn't have either, back when I thought love meant sacrifice and partnership meant one person giving while the other took. Diego found me looking at her profile and asked if I was okay. I'm great, I said, closing the laptop, just watching history repeat itself. Want to talk about it? He asked. Not really, I said. Want to cook dinner together instead? We made pasta from scratch that night, him mixing the dough while I made the sauce, moving around each other in our kitchen like dancers who knew the steps. This was partnership, not one person doing everything while the other claimed to help by existing. Diego proposed 6 months later at the restaurant in La Jolla, where we'd had our first official date. He'd planned everything perfectly, checked my work schedule to ensure I had no big presentations the next day, invited my closest friends, made reservations for the golden hour so the lighting would be perfect for photos. He'd even called my jewelry designer friend secretly to get my ring size and style preferences. I want to build a life with you, he said, down on one knee while our friends filmed and cried. A real life where we both show up for each other. I said yes, obviously not because of the perfect proposal, but because he'd proven every day that he understood partnership. Wedding planning was surprisingly easy because Diego actually participated. He researched venues while I looked at caterers. He handled the music while I handled the flowers. When his mother had opinions about the guest list, he dealt with her. When my aunt started drama about seating arrangements, I handled it. This is weird, my married friend Marisol said when we went dress shopping. Where's the stress? Where's the groom who doesn't care about napkin colors and leaves everything to you? Dating someone who acts like an adult, I said, zipping up a dress that made me look like a mermaid. Revolutionary concept. I sent Carmen a wedding invitation out of courtesy, knowing she wouldn't come. She responded with a polite decline and a note. Javier saw the announcement on Facebook. He spent that day drinking alone in his childhood bedroom. I'm happy you found someone who deserves you. The wedding went off perfectly. Everything split down the middle as it should be. Diego handled the photographer and DJ. I managed the flowers and catering. When vendor issues arose, we each dealt with our assignments without dumping problems on the other. My new mother-in-law, Rosa, pulled me aside during the reception while Diego danced with his grandmother. I heard about your previous relationship, she said, squeezing my hand. My sister went through something similar. Her ex couldn't even feed himself without her. It's different with Diego, I told her, watching him spin his grandmother carefully, ensuring she didn't lose her balance. I know, Rosa said. I raised him to be a partner, not a project. His father and I split everything too. Still do, 40 years later. She hugged me, a warm, genuine embrace that felt like acceptance and understanding. Thank God you knew your worth, she whispered. So many women never figure that out. Those words stayed with me through our honeymoon, through settling into married life, through the quiet moments when I'd remember how different things used to be. 2 years passed in what felt like minutes, 2 years of shared responsibilities, mutual respect, actual partnership. I'd been promoted twice, started leading my own team, bought a car I chose and paid for myself. The woman who used to set Javier's alarms felt like a character from someone else's story, someone I'd heard about but never met. I was at Whole Foods in Del Mar on a Saturday morning, Diego at home preparing for a dinner party we were hosting together, him handling the main course, me shopping for appetizers and wine. The store was packed with weekend shoppers, couples, and families. That's when I saw them a couple that stopped me mid-reach for avocados, hitting me in a bone-deep way I recognized from mirrors 3 years ago. She was pushing the cart, checking a list, grabbing items with practiced efficiency, while her boyfriend, a guy in his 30s wearing a Padres jersey, trailed behind, playing a game on his phone, sound effects blaring loud enough to draw glares from other shoppers. "Babe, did you get my protein powder?" he asked without looking up. "It's not on the list," she said, already sounding defeated. "I told you yesterday I was out. You mentioned it while I was on a call, and I asked you to text it to me. Whatever, just get it now, the vanilla one. Actually, check if they have chocolate, too." She turned the cart around, heading back to the supplement aisle while he kept playing his game, not offering to get it himself. I watched her shoulders slump as she pushed the heavy cart, and I wanted to shake her, to tell her his protein powder wasn't her responsibility, that his memory wasn't her job, that she was drowning, and he was the weight pulling her under. But I knew she wouldn't listen. I wouldn't have. Back when I thought love meant anticipating every need, that being a good girlfriend meant being a maid, chef, and life coach rolled into one. I finished my shopping and saw them again at checkout. She unloaded the cart while he scrolled through his phone. When the total came up, she pulled out her credit card without him reaching for his wallet. The cashier asked if they wanted help to their car, and he said yes before she could answer, then walked ahead while she waited for the receipt. In the parking lot, I watched her load all the groceries while he sat in the passenger seat with the AC running. She closed the trunk, returned the cart, and got in the driver's seat. He never looked up from his phone. I sat in my car, remembering all the times I'd done exactly that, loaded groceries alone while Javier waited, paid while he assumed I would, driven because he was tired from gaming until 4 a.m. The ghost of that woman haunted me sometimes, the one who thought that was normal, that was love, that was just what girlfriends did. My phone buzzed with a text from Diego. "Hey, I'm at the store getting flowers for tonight. Want me to grab anything else while I'm here?" The contrast hit like cold water. My husband was voluntarily going to a second store for flowers for our joint dinner party, asking if I needed anything not because I reminded him, but because he saw something that needed doing and did it. I texted back, "Maybe some of those fancy chocolates your mom likes?" She mentioned loving them last time. "Already grabbed them," he replied with a smiley face. Great minds. This was partnership, both people showing up. That evening, our dinner party went off perfectly. Diego and I moved around our kitchen like we'd been doing this for decades, him plating his perfectly cooked salmon while I arranged the appetizers I'd bought. Our friends Marisol and Juan, Miguel and his new girlfriend, Diego's cousin Rafael and his husband arrived, filling our home with laughter. "You two make this look so easy," Marisol said, watching us work. "Remember when you were with what's-his-name and you did everything yourself?" "Javier," I said, refilling wine glasses. "And yeah, I remember." "Whatever happened to him?" Juan asked. "He kind of disappeared from social media. Last I heard, he was living with his parents," I said neutrally. "Working some retail job, I think." Miguel's girlfriend, who didn't know the history, asked, "Were you together long?" 3 years, I said. 3 years too long. Diego appeared at my side, kissing my temple. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I told him, meaning it. The conversation moved to work, vacation plans, the new restaurant in Solana Beach everyone wanted to try. But Marisol pulled me aside later while the guys debated baseball. "You look happy," she said. "Like, actually happy. Not pretending everything's fine happy." "I am," I said. "It's amazing what happens when you're with someone who acts like an adult." "I still can't believe that asshole wouldn't pick up your mom's prescription," she said, shaking her head. "When you told me that story, I wanted to key his car." "It was the best thing that could have happened," I said, surprising myself. "If he'd helped just once, I might have stayed. I might have spent my life managing his." Marisol raised her glass. "To dodged bullets." "To dodged bullets," I agreed, clinking my glass against hers. Later that night, after everyone left and we cleaned up together, Diego washing dishes, me drying and putting them away, we sat on our couch with the leftover wine, enjoying the quiet. "Your friends are great," he said. "I'm glad they like me." "They love you," I told him. "Marisol especially. She says you've restored her faith in men." He laughed. "The bar was pretty low after your ex." "Underground," I agreed. The bar was underground. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if he'd been different?" Diego asked. "If he'd helped with your mom?" I thought about it, really considered it for the first time in months. "I'd probably still be setting his alarms," I said. "Still packing his lunches, managing his calendar, living his life instead of mine." "His loss," Diego said, pulling me closer. "His loss," I agreed. But it wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about the life I'd built after walking away from someone who thought I existed to serve him. It was about the partner I'd found who understood that relationships meant both people showing up. It was about becoming someone who knew her worth and wouldn't settle for less. I thought about that woman in the grocery store, loading groceries while her boyfriend played on his phone. Somewhere out there, she was probably setting his alarm for tomorrow, meal prepping his lunches, checking his calendar. Diego's family understood the secret code. His mom whispered about knowing your worth like she was passing down a recipe for a happy marriage instead of tamales. That woman was drowning, just like I had been, convinced that was what love looked like. Maybe one day something would shake her awake. Maybe he'd refuse to help when she needed him most. Maybe she'd realize she was living his life instead of her own. Maybe she'd learn what I learned. His life wasn't her responsibility. Or maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she'd spend years, decades, managing someone else's existence while her dreams gathered dust. Not everyone gets the wake-up call. Not everyone learns to walk away. I realized then that I didn't hate Javier anymore. I nothinged him. Complete indifference was the most powerful revenge of all. He was a lesson learned, a cautionary tale, a reminder of what I'd never accept again. He existed in my past like a bad dream you can barely recall once you're awake. The last time I thought about him with any focus was almost a year later when Carmen sent one final Facebook message. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. "He's getting married," she wrote, "to a girl who reminds me of you from 3 years ago. She does everything for him." I tried to warn her, but she thinks I don't understand their love. I wanted you to know you were right about everything. His life wasn't your responsibility. I just wish I'd taught him that sooner. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. Some lessons are learned the hard way, and Javier would never learn his, because there'd always be another woman willing to be his mother, maid, personal assistant, another woman who confused servitude with love. I deleted the message and went back to my life. My actual life, not someone else's I was managing. Diego and I were planning a trip to Italy, something we'd researched and saved for together. My team at work had landed a huge client. I was training for a half marathon. I was living, not just existing as someone's support system. The woman who used to set Javier's alarms was gone. In her place stood someone who understood a fundamental truth it took too long to learn. The only life you're responsible for is your own, and once you really understand that, you're free. One morning, Diego's alarm didn't go off. His phone had died overnight because he forgot to plug it in. He woke up an hour late, panicking about a presentation. "Why didn't you wake me?" he asked, rushing around our bedroom. "I didn't know your alarm didn't go off," I said. "I was in the shower." He stopped, then laughed. "Right, my alarm, my responsibility. Sorry, that was unfair." "You're going to be okay?" I asked. "Yeah, I'll call my boss from the car, explain what happened. My fault for not charging my phone." He kissed me goodbye and rushed out. That evening, he came home with flowers and takeout from my favorite Thai place in Pacific Beach. "For being a jerk this morning," he said. "I was stressed and took it out on you." "You weren't a jerk," I said. "You asked a question and immediately recognized it was unfair." "Still," he said, "you're not my alarm clock." "No," I agreed, accepting the flowers. "I'm not." And he set 2 alarms for the next morning and bought a charging station for his nightstand that weekend. Because that's what adults do, they solve their own problems instead of making them someone else's responsibility. Thanks for letting me share this journey with you. It's been cathartic to tell my story. See you next time. Subscribe for more stories like this.